Hi, welcome back to this video. This is a continuation of the C# beginner series. If you are new here, kindly subscribe and do click on the notification bell so that you will know when new videos are out. In the previous video, we did look at protected and internal access modifiers. In this particular video, we'll be looking at the protected internal and the private protected access modifiers. So the protected internal access modifier puts together the protected and the internal access modifiers. So you know, when we have the protected, it means that if you are inheriting from another class, you have access to it. But you know, the internal says that everything that is within that particular project. So it means that it allows access to derived members, that is protected. That is what protected is for. It gives access to the derived member, but also within the project or assembly. So if you are deriving from it or you are within the same assembly, it gives you access. So let's look at that with an example. So remember that we have protected and we have our internal. So let me just have another call protected internal, and let's have it as a string, and let's call this protected internal property. Let's have this as this. And if you come here now and we say object one dot, we should be able to find protected internal property, and we could set it to something and it works fine. It sees it. Unlike when it was protected, you know, if this was protected, then you can't find it outside of the class, or somewhere that derives from it. So if we come back here and we put class name, that this derives from class name, so we will see that if we put our protected here, our protected property here, we did not have issue, right? But if we have the protected internal, which we have here, let me just copy that and I come here and we paste that, it works fine because at this point it is just protected. But if I make it protected internal, what this will now do is tells it should work inside a derived class. Yes, it works, but it also works in the assembly. So if I come to this other assembly now, so within our new assembly, the new project, if we now go and we create, you know, previously, so if we come here and we say object 2 dot protected, you see we do not have access to those ones. We do not have access to even the internal. Also, we don't have access. We only have access to what is public within its assembly, right? But now if I create a class, and let's just create a class, let's say new class, and let's say it's inheriting from the class name. Again, we will talk about inheritance when we go into the OOP videos. So for the new class, if I now, let's say I have a method just so I can have access to, so here I could just say, if I call I think it was protected internal, yes, you see it, we find it here and we can assign it anything, we could do anything with it. Because even though in the previous class, when we look at class name, it is given, it has the internal, meaning that it should only be accessible within only this assembly. Because it has the protected, and protected says that so far you are inheriting from me, you have access to it. So that is why when we come here, because it is inheriting from class name, it has access to it there. But if you come there and you say you want to check from object 2, for example, object 2, we don't have access to that protected internal, because in this place is not inheriting from class name and is not also within the same project, because internal means it should be the same project. So it should be within the same project or should be inheriting from it for you to have access to the protected internal property. So that is for the protected internal. Let's go back to the slide. So this means that it allows access to the derived members, that is those that are protected, and also those within the same project assembly. So if you are within the same assembly or you are from a derived class, then the protected internal access modifier will give you access to that. Anyone outside of that will not have access to those particular properties or methods. So finally, we look at the private protected access modifier. This also is just a combination of the private and the protected access modifiers. And you know, the private means that only that class should have access to it, and the protected means that only those that inherit from that class should have access to it. So if we go back and we go to our where we have our class, if we have a new property there and we call it private protected, and we give it a, let's call this string, and let's say private protected property. Now if I come outside of here and I said object one dot, I don't have access to the private property here. I can't access it here. It's not possible for me to access it. So if you see, I don't have access to it here. If I come to this class that inherits from it and I try to check for private protected, you see that I have access to the private protected, right? I can use it here within this particular class. Now, but the place where it becomes different is when we go to a new assembly. So if I come to this assembly now, I remember for protected internal, it was still accessible even in another assembly. If I come here and I say private protected, I think property was the name we gave it, and I try to put something there, this is complaining because it is only accessible within the same assembly. So the difference between the protected internal and the private protected is that in the private protected, it is only accessible within the same assembly. So if we go back to our previous project and we look at it, private protected is accessible within the derived class. So basically, that is the protected internal and the private protected. Please, if you do have any question, please drop it in the comment section. And as I've said, these are things you might not use for now, but it's good to know about them. And also it's good to know about them because maybe when you see a code, you see some other codes outside, you'll be able to have an understanding of why and what those mean when you see them. Thank you, and I'll see us again in the next video.